picture a single square mile of city. Now fill it with 80,000 people. Add 200 common lodging houses where a bed costs fourpence a night, and the sheets are changed once a week if you're lucky. Add slaughterhouses that run their blood straight into the gutters, so that on certain mornings the cobblestones of Aldgate are actually slick with it. Add a fog so thick with coal smoke and river damp that a man standing 3 feet away from you is nothing but a shape. And add, in the autumn of 1888, a killer nobody can catch. That's Whitechapel, the most feared square mile in the British Empire, a district that sits 15 minutes' walk from the Bank of England, from the richest financial institutions on earth, and might as well be on another planet. A place where you could hear the bells of the city churches ringing over rooftops worth millions, while beneath them, in the courts and alleys, people were starving to death in the richest city humanity had ever built. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists gawking at the murder sites, the way the sightseeing carriages actually did in November of 1888. And yes, that was a real thing. Wealthy people paid money to be driven past the spots where women died. We're not doing that. We're living it. One person, through one autumn. Everything she would have seen, smelled, heard, and survived. So I make these history stories, and honestly, I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just lying in the dark listening to me describe Victorian fog and feeling grateful for your central heating. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable. Here we go. The knock comes at 1 o'clock in the morning, and it isn't for you, but it wakes you anyway, because in this house every knock wakes everyone. Because in this house a knock at 1 in the morning has started to mean something it never used to mean. You lie completely still. The bed beneath you is a wooden frame with a rope lattice and a mattress stuffed with flock. Old rags shredded fine, lumpy as gravel, smelling of every body that has slept on it before yours. Your hip has found the same hollow it finds every night. Your feet are still in their stockings because the stockings are the only thing keeping them warm, and the stockings are damp because your boots leak. And Commercial Street was flooded ankle-deep with rain and horse muck when you walked home 8 hours ago. The knock comes again. 3 raps. Then the deputy's voice downstairs, thick with sleep and gin. We're full. Try Coonies. Footsteps retreating on the pavement outside. A woman's footsteps. You can tell by the click of worn heels. Somebody without her DOS money, turned away into the dark, walking off down Flower and Dean Street toward whatever the night decides to do with her. 3 weeks ago you wouldn't have thought twice about it. Women get turned out of lodging houses every night of the year. It's the ordinary arithmetic of poverty. No fourpence, no bed. But it is the 7th of September, 1888, and 1 week ago a woman named Mary Ann Nichols was turned away from a lodging house on Thrall Street, 1 street over from where you're lying right now, because she didn't have her 4p. She laughed about it, they say. Told the deputy to save her bed she'd soon get her DOS money. See what a jolly bonnet she had. They found her at 3:45 in the morning on Bucks Row, 10 minutes' walk from here. What was done to her, you have heard described 4 different ways by 4 different people, and each version was worse. And you have stopped listening to the descriptions because they follow you into sleep. So now a knock at 1 in the morning means something. Footsteps walking away into the dark mean something. And you lie in the blackness of a room you share with 11 other women, listening to those heels click away down the street, and you find yourself doing something you've never done before in your 19 years. You find yourself praying for a stranger. The room breathes around you. 11 other bodies. Old Sarah by the window with her whistling snore. The two sisters from Cork who sleep in one bed to save tuppence, murmuring to each other in Irish even in their sleep. Someone coughing, the deep, wet tear and cough that half of Whitechapel has, the cough that comes from breathing coal smoke and phosphorus and river fog for years, and someone else hissing at her to stop as if she could. The smell is layers. It's always layers. Closest is your own blanket, wool gone greasy with use, smelling of paraffin from the lamp and of you. Under that, the room itself. 12 women, 1 basin, 1 bucket in the corner. Behind a hung sheet that everyone pretends is a wall. Under that, seeping up through the floorboards, the kitchen of the lodging house. Old fried fish, herring bones, the burnt fat smell of the communal frying pan that has never once been washed, only wiped. And under everything, coming through the window sash that doesn't close, the smell of Whitechapel itself. Coal smoke, horse dung, the sour reek of the brewery on Brick Lane, and something sweetish and rotten underneath it all that you have learned not to think about, because thinking about it doesn't make it go away. Welcome to Flower and Dean Street, Spitalfields, on the eastern edge of the City of London in the autumn of 1888. A street that a police magazine will shortly describe as perhaps the foulest and most dangerous street in the whole metropolis. Your street. Your name is Nell Rourke. You're 19 years old. You were born half a mile from this bed, in a room off Dorset Street, to a mother who dipped matches for a living, and a father who unloaded ships when there were ships to unload and drank when there weren't, which was often. Your mother is 4 years dead. The cough took her, the same cough you can hear across the room right now. And your father is somewhere. Maybe the docks, maybe a spike, maybe dead too. You don't look for him anymore. You stopped looking the winter you turned 16 and realised that every time you found him it cost you money. You have a bed at 8p a week in Wilmot's lodging house. You pay by the week now, which makes you practically gentry on this street. A tin box under the bed with a second chemise, a comb with 9 teeth, your mother's thimble, and a hat you bought second-hand in Petticoat Lane and have worn twice. You have a job. That's the thing you have that half this room doesn't. 6 days a week you walk 2.5 miles to Bow and you make matchboxes and dip matches at the factory. And it is destroying your hands and possibly your bones, and it is the single luckiest fact of your life, and both of those things are true at once, and that is Whitechapel in one sentence. Somewhere south toward the river a church clock strikes the half hour, 1:30. The bells of Christchurch Spitalfields will wake you properly at 4:30. 3 hours. You should sleep. You don't sleep. You lie there listening to the street. Because the street talks all night, this street. A drunk man singing something that was a hymn once before the gin got into it. A police constable's measured tread. You know it's police by the rhythm, that slow regulation pace, 2.5 miles an hour. The pace of a man who is paid to walk and not to arrive anywhere. The constable's tread used to mean nothing to you. Police were the enemy of everyone you knew. Police moved your father along and fined the street sellers and broke up the only entertainments the poor could afford. Now you hear that slow tread pass beneath the window, and something in your chest loosens, just slightly, and you hate that it does. That's what fear does. You're learning. It rearranges you without asking. You pull the greasy blanket up over your ear, and you make yourself think about hands instead. About tomorrow's work. About the motion your fingers will make 10,000 times before sunset. Fold, paste, press, fold, paste, press. Until the motion follows you home in your wrists the way a day on a boat follows a sailor onto land. It's a trick your mother taught you without meaning to. When the night is bad, walk your mind through work. Work is boring. Boring is safe. Boring will carry you down into sleep like a slow river. Fold, paste, press. Somewhere out there in the dark, a woman without fourpence is still walking. Fold, paste, press. You sleep. The bells of Christchurch pull you out of the dark at 4:30, and for half a second you don't know where you are, and then the smell tells you, the way it tells you every morning before your eyes have even opened. Fried fish and paraffin and 12 sleeping women. Home. Getting up in a lodging house is a negotiation. There is one basin of water for the room, and the water was carried up last night, and it is the temperature of the room, which in September before dawn means cold enough to make your knuckles ache. You are third to it this morning, after old Sarah and one of the Cork sisters, which means the water already has a grey film on it and a smell like wet dog. You splash your face anyway. You rub your neck with a corner of your apron. There is a saying on this street, clean enough for Whitechapel, and it is not a compliment to anybody. Your boots are the morning's first real problem. They were a dead woman's boots. That's not a figure of speech. You bought them off the deputy at Cooney's after a lodger died of the fever and her effects were sold to cover her back rent. And they were good boots once. But the left sole has parted from the upper along the outside edge, and yesterday's flood got in, and overnight the leather has dried stiff as bark. You force your foot in. The leather fights you. You stamp twice on the bare floorboards, softening it, and old Sarah growls at you from her bed without opening her eyes, and you murmur sorry and stamp once more anyway, because a boot that doesn't bend will cut your ankle bloody by mile end, and you know it because it has happened. Downstairs, the kitchen of the lodging house is already half full at 4:45. This is the one genuine luxury of lodging house life, and it is real, and nobody who hasn't lived it understands it. The kitchen fire never goes out. By law and by custom, the deputy keeps it burning all day and all night, and any lodger may sit at it, and cook at it, and dry their one pair of stockings at it. In a district where a private room has no fire because coal costs money, the lodging house kitchen fire is the closest thing the very poor have to a public hearth, a parliament, a club. Around it right now, a market porter eating bread and dripping before his walk to Spitalfields Market. Two women who sell flowers when there are flowers and matches when there aren't. A docker waiting for the call on at the London docks. And the deputy himself, a slab of a man named Griffin, counting last night's coppers into a tin. You toast your bread on a fork somebody left by the grate. The bread is yesterday's, bought cheap at closing, and the fire takes the staleness out of it mostly. There's a screw of tea in your pocket and the big communal kettle on the hob, and you brew it in a tin can with a wire handle, and you drink it standing up, both hands around the can, letting the heat soak into your fingers, because your fingers have 3,000 matchboxes to make today, and they may as well start warm. The talk around the fire is what the talk has been for a week. The murder. Polly Nichols, they're calling her now. The papers found her name. The porter says the police have got a man for it. A Jew. A slipper maker they're calling Leather Apron, who's been thieving off the unfortunate women for months, taking their money with a knife in his hand. One of the flower sellers says that's all wind. Leather Apron's a bully, but he's no butcher. And anyway, her cousin heard it from a nurse at the London hospital that no ordinary man could have done what was done, that it wanted a doctor's knowledge or a slaughterman's. The docker says it's the high-rip gangs, punishing women who won't pay them protection. Griffin the deputy says nothing, but his tin of coppers says it for him. The house was full last night and will be full tonight, because suddenly nobody wants to sleep outside. And fear, whatever else it does, is good for the lodging business. You listen and you eat your toast and you say nothing, because you are 19 and a match girl, and nobody around this fire wants your opinion, and also because you don't have one, or rather you have one, but it isn't an opinion about who. It's a feeling about where. Everyone at this fire is arguing about the killer as if he were a puzzle. What you feel walking out the door at 5 o'clock into the dark is simpler and worse. The streets themselves have changed. The same 100 yards of Flower and Dean Street that you have walked your entire life, that you could walk blind, that you have walked blind, in fog so thick you steered by touching the walls. The same street now watches you back. Understand what these streets are first, because otherwise nothing about this autumn makes sense. Whitechapel and Spitalfields in 1888 are not a slum in the way you might picture a slum, one bad neighbourhood in an otherwise decent city. They are the compressed overflow of the empire itself. 50 years of London growing richer has meant 50 years of London clearing land, for railways, for docks, for warehouses, for grand streets, and every clearance has pushed the displaced poor eastward into a district that was already full. Then the pogroms in Russia sent tens of thousands of Jewish refugees fleeing west with what they could carry, and they landed here, because here was where the boats came in, and here was where a family could get a room, or half a room, or a corner of a room. The result is a density of human beings that has almost no equal in the Western world. In parts of Spitalfields, official inspectors counted houses of 8 rooms, holding 45 people. Not 45 in the house at once during the day. 45 sleeping there. And through it, every morning at 5 walk the workers. This is the part the newspapers always get wrong, then and forever after. They write about Whitechapel as a district of criminals and unfortunates, and the criminals and the unfortunates are real, but the overwhelming mass of the people around you in the dark right now, the boots ringing on the cobbles, the shapes moving under the one gas lamp at the corner of Brick Lane, are people going to work, porters, sugar bakers, cigarette rollers. Tailors and tailoresses head into the sweatshops off Hanbury Street where they'll sew for 14 hours in rooms lit by gas jets. Slaughtermen in leather aprons, and there's a detail for you. Half the working men of this district wear leather aprons, which is why the name frightens everyone and identifies no one. Walk into the yards off Aldgate where 400 sheep will die before breakfast. The district is feared, and the district is also simply tired, and it gets up in the dark and it goes. You fall into the river of them heading west and south, and then you peel off east along Whitechapel Road, and this is the part of the walk you like, the only part, because Whitechapel Road is wide. After the alleys of Spitalfields, some of them so narrow you can touch both walls, some of them roofed over entirely so that noon looks like evening, the road opens up like a lung. It's one of the widest streets in London, an old Roman road, the great artery running east, and even at 5 in the morning it is alive. The herds coming in on the hoof for the slaughterhouses, actual sheep in an actual city street. Their smell wrapping around you, warm and greasy and alive. The hay carts creaking in from Essex for the Haymarket that still runs down the middle of the road 3 days a week. The coffee stall at the corner of Osborne Street with its swinging paraffin lamp, where a halfpenny buys you a mug of something hot and brown that is coffee mainly by agreement. You don't buy one. You have 3 shillings and 11 pence in the world, knotted into a rag and pinned inside your waistband, and payday is Saturday. and between now and Saturday lie 2 rents, one of them overdue. Past the London hospital, its long dark front already showing lit windows, the wards never sleep, where, though you don't know it, a man named Joseph Merrick, whom all of England calls the Elephant Man, is at this moment asleep in a basement room the hospital has given him for life, a few 100 feet from where the crowds once paid 2pence to see him in a shop across the road. Past the great bell foundry at the corner of Fieldgate Street, silent at this hour, where they cast Big Ben itself 30 years ago. The biggest bell in England came out of this feared and filthy district, and the men who made it are still casting bells for churches in parishes that would not let a Whitechapel man through the Lich Gate. Past the boundary stone and out of Whitechapel proper, into Mile End, into Bow, the sky going from black to charcoal to the colour of dishwater, and ahead of you, rising over the rooftops, the thing you have walked an hour to reach, the factory. The match factory at Bow announces itself the way everything in your life announces itself, by smell. A quarter mile out you get the first thread of it on the air, sulphur, sharp and eggy, riding over the ordinary coal smoke. Closer, a second smell joins it, and this one has no comparison in nature, a hot chemical smell like garlic burnt in a lamp, and that one is the phosphorus, and that one is the smell you have learned to fear the way other people fear the dark. Here is what you do, and I need you to understand what it actually means to do it, hour by hour, because "she worked in a match factory" is one of those sentences history says quickly and lives slowly. You're a boxer this season, which is a small mercy. You sit at a bench with 40 other women and girls. Some of them are 8 years old, their legs swinging under the bench because their feet don't reach the floor. And you make matchboxes. In front of you, a heap of pre-cut wood chip and printed paper, a pot of hot glue that smells of boiled bones, a brush. Fold the chip into a tray, paste the paper round it, press it, count it, next. The glue is kept hot because cold glue won't take, and so all day your fingertips move in and out of the steam of it, and by 10 in the morning the skin of your thumbs is soft and white and swollen like something drowned, and by evening it has split along the old splits, the same splits. They never fully close, and the glue gets into the splits and burns like a wasp, and you fold, paste, press, because you are paid 2pence farthing a gross. A gross is 144 boxes. Sit with that for a second. 144 boxes, folded, pasted, pressed, earns you 2pence and 1 farthing. To make what you need to live, rent, bread, tea, boots when the boots die, you need to make somewhere near 1,000 boxes a day. More, 1,200. Your hands moving from 6:30 in the morning to 6 at night with a break at midday. 10,000 small, precise motions until the motion is printed into your tendons and you make boxes in your dreams. Your fingers folding the blanket edge. Paste, press, and you are lucky. You say it to yourself the way you'd say a charm, because it is true. You're lucky because you're not upstairs in the dipping rooms anymore. Upstairs is where the match heads are made, where the cut splints go into the frames and the frames go down onto the stone slabs spread with the composition. The warm, glistening poison paste of white phosphorus. You did 2 years upstairs. You know what the air up there does. The vapour comes off the slab and off the drying racks, and you breathe it for 12 hours. And it doesn't hurt, that's the trick of it. It doesn't hurt at all, it just settles into you, into your jaw, into the bone itself, and it waits. The waiting has a name, and everyone in the factory knows the name, and nobody says it above a whisper. phossy jaw. It starts with a toothache, just a toothache, and half the poor of London have toothache, so you ignore it. You can't afford a dentist, and you can't afford to lose a day's work, so you ignore it, and that ignoring is the door the disease walks through. The tooth aches, then the gum swells, then the jaw begins, very slowly, over months, to die inside your face. The bone rots while you're still alive. It glows, they say, in the dark, a greenish-white shine along the jawline, the phosphorus lighting up the dying bone through the skin. And by then the only thing surgery can do is take the jawbone out entirely, and some of the women it happens to live for years after, jawless, feeding through what remains, and some of them it kills, and every single one of them started with a toothache they ignored because they could not afford to lose a day's work. There is a woman on your bench, Lisa Croft, 40 years old and looks 60, who worked the dipping room for 11 years. When the talk at the bench gets loud about wages or foremen or men, Lisa doesn't join in. She holds her jaw. She thinks nobody sees her do it. She presses 2 fingers flat against the left side of her face, lightly, the way you'd test bread, and then she takes the fingers away and goes back to folding, and you have watched her do this 4 times since August, and you have said nothing, because what is there to say? And because saying it out loud might make it true, and because, be honest, Nell, because if Lisa goes to the foreman with a bad jaw, Lisa is dismissed the same day. That is simply what happens. The company does not keep the sick, and Lisa has 3 children in 1 room off the Roman road. This is the arithmetic nobody puts on a sampler. In Whitechapel and Bow in 1888, the most dangerous thing is not the man with the knife. Statistically, overwhelmingly, mathematically, the thing that will actually kill the women on this bench is the work, the damp, the cough, the childbed, the jaw. This autumn, one man is murdering women in the dark and the whole world is watching. The factories have been quietly doing it for 50 years and the world calls it industry. But something happened this summer, right here, at these benches, and you were part of it. And it is the proudest thing you've ever done, and it still makes your heart knock to think about. In July, the matchwomen went out. It started with a magazine article. A lady journalist, Annie Besant, wrote up the wages and the fines and the phosphorus and called the shareholders' dividends blood money. And the management demanded the workers sign a paper saying they were well treated and the article was lies. And the women wouldn't sign. And a girl was sacked for it, or that was the spark anyway, and then it happened. The thing that nobody, not the management, not the newspapers, not the union men, believed factory girls capable of. 1,400 of you put down the frames and the brushes and walked out into the July sun. You remember the sound of it more than anything, boots on the stairs. Hundreds of boots on wooden stairs, not the shuffle of clocking off but a drumming, a rolling thunder, girls laughing and shrieking and someone singing, out through the gates, and the foreman shouting names into the noise and the names just dissolving powerless into 1,400 women in the road. You walked to the West End, some of you, marched right into the rich streets in your work aprons, and ladies on the pavement covered their noses, and you held your split thumbs up to a gentleman's face when he asked what you girls could possibly want. And you watched him look at your hands and stop talking. 3 weeks. Strike pay from a public fund, bread you queued for, meetings on the waste ground at Mile End where women stood up on carts, women standing on carts, giving speeches, and at the end of 3 weeks the company gave in. The fines abolished, the deductions abolished. A union, the largest union of women in the country, run by Matchgirls from Bow and Whitechapel and Poplar. The newspapers called it astonishing. You call it Tuesday because you were there, and you know what the papers will never print. That it wasn't astonishing at all. That the same women who are called the roughest and most degraded class in England organised a strike with no funds, no offices and no men, and won it in 21 days. Because when you have spent your whole life doing sums like fourpence for the bed and twopence farthing the gross, you are not stupid. You have simply never once been asked. That was July. This is September. And here is the bitter joke that the autumn is playing on the East End. For 3 shining weeks this summer, when the world looked at the women of Whitechapel, it saw fighters. Now the murders have started, and the world is looking again harder than ever, the whole planet's newspapers turning their gaze onto these few streets. And what they see is victims. It will stay that way for 100 years. Ask anyone what happened to the women of Whitechapel in 1888, and they will name a killer. Almost no one will name the strike. You don't know that yet, sitting at your bench, folding your boxes, but you feel the change already in the way the lady journalists have stopped coming to the union meetings and started coming to the mortuary inquests. Fold, paste, press. The glue burns the split in your left thumb. Liza touches her jaw and takes her fingers away. Outside the tall windows, the light goes from dishwater to pewter to dusk, and the gas jets come on down the length of the workroom with a sound like a row of small gasps, and at 6 the bell goes, and you stand, and your spine unstacks itself vertebra by vertebra like something being unpacked, and you begin the 2.5 miles home. In the dark now, into the district the whole world has started watching. The walk home is a different country from the walk out. Same road, same mile markers, the bell foundry, the hospital, the coffee stall. But the morning walk happens in a crowd all moving one way with one purpose, and the evening walk happens in the full boil of Whitechapel Road at night, and Whitechapel Road at night in 1888 is one of the great spectacles of the earth, and I mean that exactly. The costermongers' barrows line both curbs for the better part of a mile, and every barrow has its naphtha flare, a can of naphtha with a burning jet, roaring softly, throwing a hot orange light that jumps and gutters in the wind. So the whole road is a double river of fire with a dark stream of people pouring between. The noise is a solid thing you push through. Fried fish, penny apiece, hot eels, whelks, sprats, halfpenny the lot before I shuts. Old Clo, old Clo. A man selling song sheets is bellowing the tunes, you'll know what you're buying, and 3 barrows down another man is bellowing a different tune, and between them a woman with a basket of watercress. Watercress in September is old and bitter, but it's a farthing, is crying her cresses in a voice that has been crying them for 40 years and has worn down to 2 notes, like a bird. Above the barrows the shop fronts blaze. The gin palaces are the brightest things poor London ever sees. Plate glass, cut glass, brass rails, 100 gas jets doubled in mirrors. And that brightness is a business decision, calculated to the penny. When your room is dark and cold and holds 7 people, the point of the gin palace is that it is warm and golden and holds you. Next to the pubs, the music halls. The pavilion up the road can seat 3,500 people, and tonight it will, at 4pence for the gallery, the same price as a bed. Every night, thousands of your neighbours choose the songs over the sheets, and if you had to explain Whitechapel to a stranger in one fact, that one would do. And threading through all of it, tonight and every night now, the new ingredient. Fear being sold. The newsboys have the evening editions and the evening editions have the murder. Still a week on, because the papers have discovered what the murder does to circulation. Horrible details, latest on the Bucks Row atrocity. The inquest verbatim, a penny. Men buy the papers and stand reading them under the flares with their faces lit from below. Outside the Princess Alice pub, a crowd has gathered around a man who claims his brother-in-law helped carry the body, and he is giving the details, giving them with relish, and the crowd is packed shoulder to hear, and at the back of the crowd, pale, listening, are women who will walk home alone from this spot in an hour. You buy your supper from a barrow, fried fish, the batter more than the fish, hot enough to burn your fingers through the newspaper wrapping, and you eat it walking, because eating it walking means the heat of it is in you rather than gone, and the newspaper it's wrapped in is Tuesday's, and between the grease stains you can read the word Whitechapel in capitals, and you fold that part inward and eat off the racing results instead. At the corner of Osborne Street, where Whitechapel Road narrows and becomes Brick Lane, and the great blazing river of the road funnels down into the dark capillaries of Spitalfields, there is a moment. There is always a moment every night at this exact corner where you stop. Ahead of you, your streets, Flower and Dean, Thrall, Fashion Street, Dorset Street. Perhaps 200 yards of walking, total, and the 200 yards are dark. Not dark like a modern street with a lamp out. The lamps in these side streets are few and gas and feeble, a smudge of yellow every 50 or 80 feet with true blackness pooled between, and the blackness has texture, doorways deep as cupboards, court entrances like open mouths, and you know every one of them. You've known them since you could walk, and for 19 years they were just the furniture of home. Polly Nichols died 200 yards from your bed, in a gateway exactly like these gateways, on a street exactly this dark. And the man who did it walked away down streets exactly like these, and was not seen, and has not been caught, and is... This is the sentence your mind keeps assembling no matter how you scatter the pieces. He is somewhere, not somewhere abstract, somewhere with an address. He sleeps in a bed inside this square mile in all likelihood. He buys fried fish from a barrow. He has perhaps walked past you under the flares tonight, one dark shape among 10,000 dark shapes, and this is the specific poison of this autumn, the thing the newspapers can print 100 versions of without ever touching. Not the fear of a monster, but the fear of the ordinary. Every man in a leather apron, every man with a Gladstone bag, every man, full stop, standing still in a doorway, and men stand still in doorways constantly. They always have. It never meant anything before. You do what the women of these streets have started doing this week, without anyone organising it. You wait at the corner until there are others going your way. Tonight it's the two Cork sisters, coming back from the sack-making place on Wentworth Street. And a woman you know by sight from Cooney's, and without a word being said about why, the four of you walk the 200 yards together, your boot heels loud, nobody talking much, and at the door of Wilmot's you say good night, almost gaily, relief dressed up as cheerfulness, and you're inside, in the smell of the kitchen fire and old herring, and something in your shoulders lets go of something it has been holding since Osborne Street. 4pence to Griffin for the night. You're paid up till Friday, actually, but you hand over your weekly 8pence on Wednesdays, and today is Wednesday. And you take your tin can to the fire, and this is the good hour, the one good hour, the hour that keeps the whole machine of your life turning over. Because the kitchen at night is full, and the kitchen at night is funny. That is the thing the reformers and the journalists who tour these lodging houses never manage to get into their reports, though a few of them notice it and are unsettled by it. The poorest people in England laugh constantly. Old Sarah is telling the story of the bishop. She was in service 40 years ago, allegedly to a bishop, and the story of what the bishop kept in his washstand has been improving steadily for a decade, and the market porter has heard it 11 times and is feeding her the cues like a music hall straight man. Somebody's boy is being taught cribbage and being robbed blind, farthing by farthing, and taking it well. A tailor from one of the Hanbury Street sweatshops, a Russian Jew with careful English, is toasting a herring on the communal fork, and old Sarah, who 3 drinks ago was declaiming that the murderer must be a foreigner because no Englishman could do such things. This is what the whole East End is saying this week, and it is about to get much louder and much uglier. Old Sarah is now supervising the tailor's herring like a foreman and instructing him that he's holding the fork too high, and he is gravely thanking her for her expertise, and the whole room is grinning, and this exact scene, the suspicion, and the herring, and the shared fire, all in 1 hour at one grate, is the truth about how this district actually lives, and no single newspaper account will ever hold all of it at once. You mend your boot by the fire. That's your hour's work. A needle, waxed thread from your tin, the left boot in your lap, stitching the sole back to the upper along the split, pushing the needle with your thimble, your mother's thimble, brass, worn through at the crown so you have to catch the needle's eye on the rim, and the leather is stiff and fights the needle, and your thumb splits ache with the pressure, and the fire cracks and spits, and old Sarah's bishop reaches his familiar catastrophe, and the room roars, and you knot the thread and bite it off and turn the boot in the firelight, and the stitching is ugly and strong, like everything here, and it'll hold a month. You're in your bed by 10, 11 women breathing. The knock, when it comes tonight, is only a lodger who forgot the house rule about the side door, and you hear Griffin curse him up the stairs, and you smile in the dark, and sleep takes you before the church clock strikes 11. For 8 days that is the shape of your life. Bells, basin, boots, the dark walk out, the glue, the gross, the flares, the corner, the fire, the bed. 8 days. The papers begin to say the panic is passing. The coffee stall man says the police have it in hand. On the morning of the 8th of September, a Saturday, you're at your bench in Bow when the whisper comes up the room like a draught under a door, bench to bench, folding girls leaning to dipping girls, and the whisper says Hanbury Street, and you feel the fish supper turn over in your stomach because Hanbury Street is not 200 yards from your bed this time. Hanbury Street is 80. Her name was Annie Chapman, and you knew her. Not well. Nobody knew Annie well in the end. That is what the inquest will slowly reveal. Witness by witness, a life worn down to acquaintances. But you knew her the way the streets know each other. A stout, short woman going on 47, blue eyes, dark brown hair going grey, who did crochet work when her hands were steady enough and sold flowers when they weren't, and who had been staying at Crossingham's on Dorset Street, and who you'd stood behind at the coffee stall perhaps a dozen times in your life, close enough to see the mend in her shoulder seam. 2 nights ago, you will hear this at second hand, and then third hand, and then read it in a newspaper held by someone else on your bench, the same fact wearing 3 different coats. 2 nights ago she sat in the kitchen at Crossingham's without her DOS money, and the deputy asked for it, and she said she hadn't got it, and she went out into the night to earn it, and at the door she said, "Don't let the bed. I shan't be long. Don't let the bed. I shan't be long." They found her at 6 in the morning in the backyard of number 29 Hanbury Street, a house exactly like every house on that street. A shop front, 17 people sleeping in the rooms above, a passage running straight through from the street door to the yard, and the street door kept unlocked all night because the lodgers come and go, and nobody has ever owned a key. Anyone could walk that passage. Everyone did. Working men used those yards as a shortcut, and courting couples used them for privacy, and nobody thought anything of footsteps in the passage at night, because footsteps in the passage at night were the sound of the house itself, like its breathing. One of the lodgers, an old market porter, went down that passage at 5:45 on his way to work, and what he found in the yard by the fence I am not going to describe to you, because you are trying to sleep, and because Whitechapel itself split in exactly this way in September 1888, into the people who repeated the details and the people who refused them. The details were available. The inquest put them on the record, and the papers put the record on every breakfast table in Britain, medical evidence and all, and there were men outside the 10 Bells reciting it like a music hall turn. You chose refusal. When the talk at the bench turned anatomical, you put your eyes on the glue pot and hummed inside your own skull, one of the strike songs from July. Boots on the stairs, until the words washed out. It didn't always work. Enough got through. Enough that you know it was worse than Buck's Row, that the doctors used the word skillful, and that it happened in a yard behind a sleeping house, 17 people within 40 feet, a paling fence away from the yard next door where another lodger was awake and heard, he thought, a voice and something falling against the fence, and went back to what he was doing, because a bump against a fence in Spitalfields at 5:30 is nothing, is a cat, is a drunk, is the house breathing, 80 yards from your bed. You walk home that Saturday evening in a crowd of thousands, because all of Whitechapel has come out onto the streets, and this is a thing the newspapers report as morbid curiosity, and they are not wholly wrong. But stand in it for a moment and feel what it actually is. Hanbury Street is impassable. The police have the passage of number 29 blocked, so the crowd fills the roadway wall to wall, hats and shawls as far as you can see in both directions, and the windows of the houses opposite are full of faces, and this detail is true, and I have never stopped thinking about it. The lodgers in those opposite houses are charging admission. A penny to come upstairs and look down into the yard from their windows. There are queues on the stairs. A woman is selling roast chestnuts to the queues. And you could read that as ghoulishness, and the West End papers did at length with adjectives. Or you could notice that a penny is a quarter of a night's bed, and the people paying it are people to whom Annie Chapman was not a headline but a neighbour, a face from the coffee stall, a voice from a kitchen fire, and they are doing the thing that people at the bottom have always done with death, which is to walk right up to it and look at it, because looking away is a luxury, because their whole lives are lived 80 yards from the fence, and pretending otherwise fools no one. But something else is in the crowd tonight, and it is new, and it frightens you more than the yard does. It has a low sound, the crowd under the talking, a hum you feel in your breastbone, and it has a direction. Word has been running through the district all day. Leather apron, leather apron. The police want leather apron, and leather apron is a Jew. And now, at the edges of the great crowd, it is curdling. A knot of men outside the Queen's Head are stopping other men, foreign-looking men, making them show their hands, their bags. On Brick Lane, someone has thrown a bottle through the window of a Jewish baker's. You hear and feel the crowd around you hear a rumour pass in real time, mouth to mouth, mutating as it goes. A man arrested with a knife, a man arrested with an apron, a man chased down Commercial Street. And each version tightens the hum a half turn, and men begin to move with purpose toward wherever the last version pointed. And you understand, standing wedged in that crowd with your supper, going cold in its newspaper, that you're watching the district decide who to be afraid of, and that it is choosing, as frightened crowds nearly always choose, the target it can reach. It will get worse before it gets better. In the coming weeks, a coroner will speculate and the papers will amplify, and there will be nights when no Jewish man can safely walk from Commercial Street to his own door, and the police will become so alarmed by it that when a piece of writing about Jews is found chalked on a wall after a later murder, the Commissioner of Police himself will order it sponged off before dawn, before it can be photographed, destroying evidence in a murder case rather than risk the East End going up like a match. That is how close it comes. The tailor who toasts his herring at your kitchen fire stops coming to the kitchen in the evenings. You notice, and you know why, and you never learn where he goes instead. And 30 years from now, an old woman in a different country, you will still think about that. The seat by the fire, empty, and old Sarah looking at it and saying nothing, having said 3 drinks in, so much. You push out of the crowd the back way, up Wilkes Street past the towering old silk weavers' houses with their wide attic windows, built for light 150 years ago, when this district wove silk for duchesses and Huguenot masters kept songbirds, and there are still old men alive on these streets who wove silk, before the trade died and the great houses were carved into lodgings, and that is Spitalfields for you. Gentility rotting in layers, every ruin here was somebody's pride. And you come out under the front of Christ Church, and you stop because you always stop, even tonight, especially tonight. Christ Church, Spitalfields. Nicholas Hawksmoor's church, finished in 1729, its great strange spire going up 225 feet over the market and the lodging houses, the tallest thing in the eastern sky, white Portland stone gone grey-black with a century and a half of coal smoke except where the rain washes it, so that the whole vast front is streaked like something weeping. It is too big. That is the first thing everyone feels about it, and nobody says in guidebooks. It is monstrously, deliberately too big for the streets around it. A cliff of stone hanging over hovels, built that big on purpose, by an Act of Parliament 60 years before your grandmother was born, to overawe exactly the kind of people who now sleep in its shadow. And, on its portico steps, and in the little churchyard beside it that everyone calls Itchy Park, sleep is the right word, because the homeless of Spitalfields doss there in rows in the daytime in the church's lee, dozens of them, and tonight even the sleepers in Itchy Park are awake and sitting up, because the crowd noise from Hanbury Street carries, and the church clock face glows faint yellow high up in the dark like a second moon, and you stand at the railings with your cold supper, looking up the full impossible height of the spire, and you make yourself a promise you do not entirely understand. Before this is over, whatever this is, however it ends, you're going to get up there, up the tower, above all of it. You want, with a want as blunt as hunger, to look down on this square mile from a place where it cannot touch you, and see whether it looks from up there like anywhere else on earth. Then you walk the last 80 yards home with 3 women you've never met before, all of you falling in together at the corner by instinct now. Boot heels loud, nobody saying why, and Griffin bolts the door behind you, and that night the house is so full there are women sleeping sitting up in the kitchen, paying 2pence for the privilege of a bench and the fire, and nobody complains about the crowding. Nobody this week wants room to themselves. Now let me pull the camera back for a moment, the way I sometimes do, because to understand what happens to Whitechapel in the autumn of 1888, to understand how one district earned a fear that would outlive everyone in it, you have to understand what happens next in the weeks after Hanbury Street. Something with no precedent. The district becomes the most watched place on the planet. The reporters arrive first. Not the local men, they were always here, but the specials, the star writers of the great dailies, and then the Americans, and then the French, and within a fortnight there are correspondents filing Whitechapel copy to newspapers in New York, Paris, Melbourne, Buenos Aires. Some of them do the thing that will become a tradition of journalism for the next century and a half. They dress down. They buy shabby coats and broken hats and go into the lodging houses to spend a night among the poor, and they write it up breathlessly. The smells, the fourpenny beds, the ruined faces at the kitchen fire, and the people they write about read the articles. That's the part the correspondents never quite grasp. That the lodging house kitchens take the papers too. That old Sarah has your discarded Star open on her knee, doing the funny voices of the fine gentleman who slept in the corner bed on Tuesday pretending to be a docker. His hands, she says, his lovely white hands. He'd never done a day's work with them hands, only wrote lies with them. And the whole kitchen howling. And the money arrives. This is the strangest current of that strange autumn. Fear opens London's purse. Charities that begged all decade for pennies for the East End suddenly find drawing rooms full of donors because the murders have made the poverty visible, or rather have made it frightening, which in the ledgers of the comfortable comes to the same thing. A newspaper prints a sermon of a sentence that everyone repeats. The real criminal is the social system that breeds such places. Wealthy men write letters to the Times proposing to raise the whole quarter, and here is the joke the streets themselves make about it. The joke you first hear from the market porter at your own kitchen fire, delivered flat without a smile. He's done more for Whitechapel in 2 months than Parliament done in 20 years. The kitchen laughs the way people laugh at a funeral. It is the truest sentence anyone says all autumn, and everyone in the room knows it, and everyone in the room hates that they know it. Within a few years the worst streets of the quarter, including, though you don't know it yet, your own, Flower and Dean Street itself, will be bought up and torn down and rebuilt as model dwellings, and the reformers will cite the autumn of 1888 in every prospectus, and the rents in the model dwellings will be too high for lodging-house people, and the lodging-house people will move along into the next parish, carrying their tin boxes, the way the poor of London have always moved along, one clearance ahead of respectability, and the police arrive. Reinforcements drafted in from every division, plainclothes men by the score, until the joke. Whitechapel makes jokes the way other places make excuses. It is the local industry. The joke is that you can't spit on Commercial Street without hitting a detective, and the further joke is that half the plainclothes men are so obviously policemen, big scrubbed pink men in labourers' clothes that fit them like costumes, walking the regulation 2.5 miles an hour out of pure habit, that the children follow them calling the time of day. Some detectives dress as women. That is true. Constables in veils and skirts totter along the worst streets at 2 a.m. as bait, and the killer does not take the bait. but a drunk docker proposes marriage to one of them outside the Britannia, and the story keeps the kitchens laughing for a week. But the watching that matters, the watching that changes the feel of every night from now to Christmas, isn't the press or the police, it's the Vigilance men. Because the district, being told nightly by every paper in the world that it cannot protect its own women, does the thing this district always does, the thing it did in July at the factory gates. It organises. Local tradesmen, a builder, a publican, vestrymen, the kind of men with shops to lose, form the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, and they raise funds, and they petition the government for a reward, and they are refused, and they hire private patrols, and beyond the official committee, informally, in the way the East End does everything, the streets grow their own watch. Every night now, from dusk, there are men out, pairs of them at corners with lanterns and sticks, ex-soldiers, porters after their shifts, publicans' sons. They stop strangers and ask their business. They walk women from the corner of Osborne Street into the dark cross streets. There is a rota, an actual rota, chalked inside the door of the Frying Pan pub. And the first time it happens to you, a Tuesday night in late September, a man your father's age with a bullseye lantern and a mastiff on a rope falls into step beside you at your corner and says, "Only, which house, girl?" and walks you the 80 yards, and stands until Griffin's door shuts behind you. You stand inside the passage with your back against the wall and find your eyes stinging, and you couldn't at first say why, and then you can. It is the first time in your life that the place you were born has treated your body as a thing worth guarding. It took this. That's the other half of the feeling, the black half. And you let yourself feel that too. It took this. And you begin, in those same weeks, to do a thing you've never done. You begin to read. You could always read. A board school got 3 years of you before the factory did, which puts you ahead of your mother, who signed her name with across her whole life. But reading cost money and light, and you had neither. Now the kitchen fire is a reading room. The papers arrive nightly, bought by someone or salvaged from someone, passed hand to hand, read aloud by whoever has the strongest eyes, and through September you sit with your boot mending in your lap, and you listen to your own district being explained to the world, and it is an education in exactly how wrong print can be. The papers say no woman walks alone after dark in Whitechapel. You walked alone from Bow this evening, you and 10,000 others, because wages don't stop for terror. The papers say the district is paralysed by fear. The Pavilion is sold out and the Cambridge has a new comic singer, and the Saturday market on the Lane is so packed you carry your elbows high. The papers describe the women of the lodging houses as wretched, degraded, lost, and you look across the fire at old Sarah, who buried a husband and 2 sons, and once threw a bailiff bodily into a water trough, holding court with a herring on a fork like a sceptre, and you understand something at 19 that some people never learn at all, that being written about is a kind of weather. It happens over your head, it soaks you, and it has almost nothing to do with what you are. Then September ends, and on the last night of it, the last Saturday, the weather breaks. The real weather, cold rain slanting in off the river all evening, and you're woken in the black middle of the night, not by a knock this time, by bells, by running, by the whole street coming alive at once beneath the window, doors, boots, a police whistle going somewhere south, long and long and long, and another answering it further off, and old Sarah's voice in the dark of the room saying, flat and awake and old, "God's mercy, not another." It is the 30th of September, 1888, and it is not another. It is another too. here is how the worst night in the history of the district reaches you, in the order it reaches you, which is not the order it happened, because that is how nights like this work. Not as a story, but as a flood, arriving from every direction at once, out of sequence, contradicting itself, and you standing in it trying to build the truth out of driftwood. First, the whistles and the room deciding. 12 women in the dark, and nobody says shall we go down, and everybody goes down. Shawls over night clothes, and the kitchen is filling, and Griffin has unbolted the front door and stands in it like a plug in a drain, letting news in and nobody out. A boy is in the street shouting something with the word burner in it. Burner Street means nothing to you for a moment, then it does. South, the other side of Commercial Road, off the district's edge, 10-12 minutes walk, a street of little houses and a socialist club where the Jewish tailors and cabinet makers hold their debates and their Saturday concerts. Somebody's found in the yard of the club. The boy is shouting, throat cut, found so fresh, And Griffin shuts the door on the rest of it and looks at the room and says, with the authority of a man who bolts doors for a living, nobody wants what's out there. Fire's lit. Sit down. And the room sits. That's the part you'll remember. Perhaps 20 women and a few men, sitting down around a lodging-house kitchen fire at 1 a.m. because a large man told them to, and the kettle going on, because in England even the apocalypse gets a kettle, and then the hour that follows, which is its own particular kind of hour. The fire cracking, the rain on the window, and the street outside filling and roaring and streaming south past the door, and the room not talking about it, talking instead, doggedly, about anything else. Old Sarah is made to do the bishop and does it badly, and is heckled for doing it badly and does it again properly, while every single person in the room keeps one ear aimed at the door the whole time, so that the room has the cocked, trembling attention of a dog pretending to sleep. And then, sometime after 2, the door knocks, and it's one of the Vigilance men, the one with the mastiff, rain running off his hat brim, asking Griffin for hot water for his flask, and he stands in the doorway with the dog steaming beside him, and he says the sentence that breaks the night in half. He says, "There's a second one, in the city, Mitre Square." The kitchen goes silent the way a struck bell goes silent after, because everyone in that kitchen can do this particular geography in their sleep. Burner Street is southeast. Mitre Square is west. Inside the City of London itself, the square mile of banks and counting houses, 3 minutes' walk past the Aldgate pump, a little dark cobbled square you yourself have cut through 100 times carrying nothing worth stealing, and the times which the Vigilance man has from a city constable. The first woman found at 1, the second at 1:45, 45 minutes apart, which means the whole kitchen assembles it silently in one motion, the way the whole factory bench hears a foreman's step, which means that after the first one interrupted at it their saying, he did not run to ground. He walked west through the busiest hours of the district's Saturday night, through streets crawling with police and vigilance patrols and Salvation Army pickets and 10,000 ordinary people, through, quite possibly, the very corner of Osborne Street where the naphtha flares roar, past doorways, past faces, one face among the faces wet with rain like everyone, and inside 3/4 of an hour he found another woman in another dark corner, and he was not stopped, and he was not seen. Or rather, worse, he was certainly seen by dozens, by hundreds, seen and not noticed, because there was nothing to notice. And then he was gone out of the city the way he came, through streets now boiling with whistles, carrying what he carried, and the rain washing the pavements clean behind him. That is the night the fear changes its chemistry. You can feel it change in the room around you, in your own chest. Fear of a man in the dark is old. Every woman in that kitchen was raised on it. It has rules. Light, company, numbers, the watched street. What arrives in the kitchen with the vigilance man's sentence is fear of a man the rules don't touch. He had walked through the numbers, through the light and the company, through a district that was, that exact night, more watched, more patrolled, more lit, more organised, more warned than any square mile in the world, and it had made no difference at all, and the kettle screams on the hob, and nobody moves to take it off, and the mastiff whines at the door. The next days arrive like weather fronts. Sunday. The crowds again, both sites, thousands upon thousands, and the streets between them one continuous crowd, so that Commercial Road is a slow river of hats, from Aldgate to the club. The names, when the papers find them, Elizabeth Stride, called Long Liz, a Swede, who scrubbed and sewed and charred and had told people her whole life a story about a shipwreck that wasn't true, and who was in and out of the lodging house on your own street, on Flower and Dean Street, 30 doors down. She had slept the week before she died, and Catherine Eddowes, called Kate, who had just that week walked back from the Kent hop harvest with her man, 40 miles on foot, hop-picking money spent, and who spent her last afternoon in a police cell in the city for being drunk on the pavement singing, and was let out at 1 in the morning when she could walk straight, and walked straight into Mitre Square, and the officer who released her asked her name, and she said, "Nothing," and the door of Bishopsgate Station closed behind her, and 45 minutes later she was dead. The police cells, you understand, were the safest place in London that night. They let her out because sobriety, not safety, was the law's whole business with her. "Nothing," she said. "It is the kind of joke the autumn keeps making. Nobody laughs." And then the letters. This is the week the thing gets its name. A letter had come to a news agency days before. Red ink, cocky music hall menace, signed with a name too good to be true, and the police had sat on it. And after the double night a postcard comes in the same hand crowing about the double event, and the police, desperate, print facsimiles on posters and paste them on every board in the district, asking does anyone know this writing, and so it is the police themselves, with paste and paper, who nail the name to the fear forever. You stand in a crowd 4 deep outside the post office on Commercial Street reading the poster, that jaunty copper plate, "Dear Boss," and around you people are reading it aloud to people who can't, and a man says what everyone comes to think and the police themselves come to believe, that it's a journalist's work, that some penny-a-liner manufactured the name to sell papers, and if so, it is the most successful sentence any journalist ever wrote, because 140 years later, when every other fact of this autumn has to be looked up, the name will still be the first thing every human being on earth has ever heard about Whitechapel. And you read the poster twice, and you walk to work, and at the bench Liza Croft touches her jaw and takes her fingers away, and you fold, paste, press, and the glue burns the split in your thumb, and above the workroom the October light goes down grey, and you think, he signed it laughing, whoever he was or wasn't, laughing, and 80,000 people can't sleep. October is the month of the great fear, and the great fear is mostly waiting. That's what the histories compress. 30 nights when nothing happens, and the nothing is the event. The moon becomes a public figure. The papers have decided he kills in the dark of the moon, so the whole district tracks the lunar calendar like farmers, and on the black nights the streets empty by 11, and the patrols double and the kitchens fill, and on the moonlit nights something almost like the old life comes back out of doors. Rewards are posted and grow. The Lord Mayor's £500 private funds on top, sums that are lifetimes of matchbox wages, and half the district turns detective, and neighbours inform on neighbours, and every lodging-house kitchen has its nightly parliament of theories. A doctor, a sailor on the cattle boats, a Polish madman, a Portuguese, a slaughterman, a policeman himself, which is old Sarah's theory, delivered with the fork jabbing. Who else walks all night and no one wonders? And bloodhounds are brought from the north and trialled in Hyde Park, tracking the Commissioner of Police himself across the grass for the newspapers, and the district laughs about it for days. The mighty bloodhounds and the laughing and the terror live in the same house all month, in the same hour, in the same sentence, the way they do in all besieged places, and you turn 19 and a half and you mend the other boot. And in the middle of the great fear, in the middle of October, comes the day you have promised yourself, and it comes the way good things come in your life, which is sideways, out of a chore. The church, Christ Church, you get up the tower. It happens because of old Sarah indirectly, the way most things in the house happen because of old Sarah. Sarah cleans at the church, has done for years, an arrangement older than the current sexton, brasses and the vestry floor, Thursday mornings, £1, and Sarah's knees have gone wrong with the cold weather, and Thursday morning finds her at the foot of the kitchen stairs, unable to face the walk, and you are on a rare half-day owed you from the factory, and £1 is £1, and that is how you come to be on your knees in Christ Church, Spitalfields, at 8 in the morning with a rag and a bottle of vinegar and brick dust, working shine into an eagle. The inside of the church is the biggest indoor space you have ever been alone in. That is a fact about your life worth sitting with. 19 years old, born within sight of the spire, and the largest rooms you have known are a factory floor and a music hall gallery, both of them packed with bodies. This is empty. The morning comes through the high clear glass in solid grey blocks you could lean on. The columns go up and up, white as bone where the light hits, and every sound you make, the clink of the bottle, your own knees on the stone, comes back to you a half-second late from somewhere overhead, politely, like a servant repeating your order. It is cold, a different cold from outside, an old, mineral, patient cold that comes up through your knees from stone that has not been warm since 1729. You polish the lectern eagle, the Iams dish, the rails. Your hands no polishing. The motion is fold paste press's gentler cousin, and something about the empty size of the place and the smallness of the motion undoes a knot in you that you didn't know was tied, and you find you've been crying a little, without drama, the way a wall sweats, for perhaps 10 minutes, for no reason you could name and for every reason there is, and the church says nothing, and lets you. And that, you think, kneeling there, is possibly the whole use of churches, and you finish the rails. The sexton is a small dry man named Peabody, who has watched you work for some minutes from the vestry door before he speaks, and what he says is, "Sarah sends her people, they steal the vinegar." You hold up the bottle, still corked full. He nods, and this constitutes, you will learn, a warm welcome. And because you are asking before you have decided to ask, the words simply leave on their own, you say, "Could I go up?" "The tower, I'll pay." He looks at you for a long moment. Whatever he sees, the factory hands, the mended boots, the eyes still pink, It makes him snort, which is his laugh. "Keep your penny," he says. "Mind the pigeons." The stair is inside the wall. That's the first surprise. Not a grand staircase, but a stone corkscrew barely wider than your shoulders. Worn hollow in the middle of each tread by 200 years of feet, lit every dozen turns by a slit of window. You go up with one palm flat on the cold newel, and the other brushing the outer wall, and the turning never stops, and your breath goes loud in the tube of it, and your thighs, which walk 5 miles a day and think nothing of it, are burning by the second window, because stairs are a different tax than distance, past a chamber where the clock lives, a black iron machine the size of a bed, ticking with a heavy hiccuping authority, smelling of oil and dust, the pendulum swinging its slow, hypnotic no, 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 past the bell chamber where 8 great dark shapes hang dead still in the gloom in their timber cage, and the wind is already finding gaps in the louvres and making low flute sounds around the bells, and pigeon droppings pale on every ledge like snow that mist, and up one more turning, and there is a door of grey, weathered oak on an iron latch, and the latch is stiff, and you put your shoulder to it, and then there is no more up. Light, wind, and London. You come out onto the parapet walk at the base of the spire, 200-odd feet of Hawksmoor's stone still going up behind your shoulder, and the wind takes your shawl out sideways and slaps your face fresh and cold as pump water, and you grip the stone rail with both split-thumbed hands, and you look, and for a long moment your mind simply refuses to do anything but look. The whole of it, Whitechapel, Spitalfields, the East End entire, laid out below you like a thing on a table, and the first thing, you will try to explain this at the kitchen fire tonight and fail, and try again 30 years from now and fail better. The first thing is how small it is, the kingdom of the fear, the square mile the whole earth is reading about. From up here you can hold it in one look. There is Flower and Dean Street, that one, that brown seam between roofs, your whole house one dark tile among the tiles. There is Hanbury Street, a nothing, a pencil line. You can see from the yard where Annie died to the corner where the Vigilance man waits with his dog, and it is an inch. All the 200-yard journeys that your body now makes with its shoulders up around its ears, all the black doorways, the whole labyrinth. From up here it is a stain on a map you could cover with your spread hand, penned in between the shining ribbon of the main roads, and around it, vast and lit and indifferent, London goes on and on and on to the ring of the horizon. The mast thick as reeds in the docks to the south, the dome of St. Paul's floating westward over the smoke like a grey bubble, the hills at the world's edge north and south, and between you and every horizon, roofs, 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 100,000 smoking chimneys laying their grey threads sideways on the wind, and under every single roof, people, the number refusing to fit in your head. You try it the way you'd count boxes, a family to a room, rooms to a house, houses to a street. And somewhere in the thousands the number stops being a number and becomes a kind of sound. And the second thing is the sound. It comes up at you from everywhere and nowhere. The voice of the thing itself. Iron tires on stone. 10,000 of them, blended by distance into a single continuous grinding roar, soft as surf. Under it the deeper note of the docks and the railway. Over it, small and clear as birds, the nearest street cries, a knife grinder's bell, a child. The market roars faintly directly below like a fire in a grate. A train draws a long white seam of steam across the middle distance, and the sound arrives 4 heartbeats late. This is what the district sounds like when you get far enough away that none of it can want anything from you. And it sounds. There is no other word, and you resent the word, and it is the right word. It sounds peaceful. He is down there. That thought arrives too, of course it does. Up here with the pigeons grumbling on the ledge, and the wind fluting in the louvres below your feet. Somewhere in that stain of brown roofs, under one particular tile, he is sleeping off his night, or eating his breakfast, or walking to work at the pace of everyone else. From up here you cannot tell which roof, and neither can anyone, and that is the whole terror of the autumn in one sentence. But from up here something else is also true. Something the street can never show you because the street is too close. He is one tile. The stain of roofs holds 80,000 people, and this morning they got up, nearly all of them, and lit fires, nearly all of them, and went out to work and to market and to school. Boots on the stairs, and the roar coming up at you off the stones is the sound of all of it refusing to stop. The fear is real, and the fear is everywhere, and underneath the fear the district is simply, enormously, doggedly alive, and the aliveness is bigger. That is what you came up here to find out, though you couldn't have said so at the bottom of the stairs. It is bigger. It was always bigger. The clock below you gathers itself with a grinding of iron and strikes 10, and you feel it more than hear it, up through the soles of your mended boots. 8 bells bronze going through the stone and through you, 10 slow strokes rolling out over the roofs to every ear in the parish, including 200 lodgers, 40 match hands, 1 sexton, 1 old Sarah with her bad knees, and a tile somewhere, 1 tile among the tiles, him. This same sound in every ear. You stay for 1 more strike of the wind, filling your chest with the cold, clean upper air like someone filling a jug to carry, and then you go back down the corkscrew into the world, your legs shaking in a way that is not entirely the stairs, and Peabody looks at your face when you hand back the vestry key and snorts again, kindly, and says, "Everyone comes down different. You give old Sarah her shilling entire." She bites it from habit, and then looks at you sharp, because nobody in this house has ever handed over a whole shilling that passed through their fingers, and you say the tower was your wages, and she studies you a moment longer with those old pale eyes, and then she says the only purely gentle thing you will ever hear her say, "I went up once, 50 years back," then going back to her fork and her fire. It don't change nothing, girl. It only changes you. Same as anything worth a damn. There's 1 more day from that October you should live through before the winter comes, because it holds the whole district in miniature, and it starts, like most of your best days, with money you shouldn't spend. Saturday night on Petticoat Lane, Middlesex Street on the maps, but nobody who shops there has ever once called it that, and you have your week's wages knotted in the rag at your waist, minus rent, minus the tin of tea, and the lane at night is the nearest thing your world has to a festival. The stalls run solid for half a mile, naphtha flares roaring over old boots and new braces, crockery and corsets, second-hand coats hung so thick on the rails that the stalls look like headless crowds. The patter never stops. A boot seller is holding a boot over his head like a trophy, slapping the sole with his palm, to hear that, solid as the bank. And a crowd of 30 is watching him the way crowds watch theatre, because it is theatre and everyone knows it, and the boots are probably decent anyway. 2 stalls down, a Dutch auctioneer is coming down in price on a bundle of shirts. Not 8 shillings, not 7, not 6, ladies. I'm robbing myself. 5 and 6 the lot. and the wives at the front stand with their arms folded, faces like magistrates letting him fall. You are here for stockings, and you leave with stockings, 2 pair, wool, after a negotiation conducted entirely in eyebrows, and you also leave. This was not the plan. With a 4-penny gallery ticket in your fist, because the Cork sisters caught you at the corner of Wentworth Street, and the Cork sisters are going to the pavilion, and the Cork sisters do not take refusals. So, the music hall. 4p, the same as a bed, and everyone in the gallery queue has done that arithmetic and paid anyway, because the pavilion is warm and the lodging house is warm, but the pavilion is warm and bright and loud, and yours, 3,500 people packed onto benches, oranges being eaten and thrown in roughly equal measure, the gas batons hissing over a stage where a comic in a checked suit is singing a song about his mother-in-law that every soul in the building has heard 50 times, which is precisely why they love it. And the gallery sings the chorus so hard you feel it in the bench under you, in the rail under your split-thumbed hands. For 2 hours the autumn does not exist. That is what 4p buys. Not the show, the 2 hours, and then the doors, and the cold, and Whitechapel Road at 11 at night with the crowds pouring out of 3 theatre at once. And here is the thing you notice, walking home in the river of them, that you file away and take out again years later. The fear and the singing use the same streets. The women around you are humming the comics chorus, and at Osborne Street they stop humming and gather into their little walking clusters without a word, and 80 yards later, indoors, they are humming again. Nobody decides this. It is just how the district carries it. The way you'd carry something heavy and awkward, shifting it from arm to arm, never once putting it down, and never once letting it stop you from going where you were going. That was the Saturday. The Monday of that same week is the other half of the miniature, and it is not warm and it is not bright. Monday, Liza Croft does not come to the bench. Tuesday, she does not come. Wednesday, a girl who lodges near her off the Roman road says, not looking up from her folding, that Liza's face is swelled, and the bench goes quiet the way only that bench goes quiet, and you fold and paste and press with your heart going like a fist on a door, because everyone at that bench knows what a swelled face means after 11 years in the dipping rooms, and everyone also knows what it means that Liza stayed home instead of reporting it. She is hoping it's a tooth. Just a tooth. Everyone hopes it's a tooth. You go on the Sunday. You have never been to Liza's room, and you go on the Sunday with a twist of tea and a loaf, because your mother went to women's rooms with tea and loaves your whole childhood, and apparently the motion is printed in you the way box folding is. The room off the Roman road holds Liza, 3 children, a bed, a table, and a smell of poultices. Bread and hot water bound against her jaw, the poor woman's whole pharmacy. And Liza is sitting up, and her face is wrong on the left side, and her eyes, when she sees the tea, do something that you will not be able to describe at the kitchen fire afterwards, and will not try. You don't talk about the jaw. That is the etiquette, and you both keep it. You talk about the bench, and the foreman's new waistcoat, and the strike. She wants the strike, so you give it to her. Boots on the stairs, the ladies covering their noses, the gentleman who stopped talking, and Liza laughs, carefully, on one side of her face, and holds her jaw while she does it, not hiding it now. There's no hiding it now. And when you leave, she takes your hand at the door in both of hers, her palms as cracked as yours, 2 sets of factory hands folded together like a church roof. And she says the only thing either of you says about it ever. You get out of them dipping rooms for good, Nell. Whatever it costs. You hear me? Whatever it costs. She's back at the bench in 3 weeks. It was an abscess. They got the tooth. This time it was only a tooth. And the bench celebrates the way the bench celebrates everything. With insults and a bag of broken biscuits somebody's cousin got cheap. But you have seen the room off the Roman road now, and the 3 children, and the poultice, and you understand something about the autumn of the knife, that the whole world's newspapers, filling their front pages 80 yards from your bed, have entirely failed to print. That for the women of this district, the famous terror is the 3rd or 4th most likely thing to destroy them. And they know it. They have always known it. They can rank the dangers in their sleep. The chest, the jaw, the childbed, the winter. And then, after all of those and they get up at 4:30 and walk out into all of it at once, every single morning, and the world calls them unfortunates and takes their photograph. Whatever it costs, Lisa said. You start that month doing something you have never done. You start saving toward leaving the factory. A penny here. 2pence on a good week into a second knot in the rag at your waist. At the current rate, it will take roughly forever. You do it anyway. That's the other thing the autumn is teaching you. The lesson underneath all the others, the one the Vigilance men and the strike and old Sarah's fireside parliament keep teaching in different accents. Forever is not a reason. It never was here. Nothing in this district was ever won by people who check the arithmetic first. And since we're inside that October, walk one more errand with Nell, because it takes her somewhere the guidebooks of fear never go. Inside the London hospital. It happens because of the coughing woman, the lodger by the window whose cough has crossed some line even by the standards of a room where everyone coughs. Griffin, who is not a soft man, who has turned 1,000 women into the night for want of 4pence, does the thing the hard men of this district quietly do all the time and would deny with violence if you named it. He tells you, gruffly, as if assigning a chore, to walk her up to the London on your half-day and see if the receiving room will look at her, and he puts 3pence in your hand for the beef tea after. And when you look at the 3pence, he says, "Fell out me pocket, mind your business." So you walk her there, the coughing woman, whose name is Mrs. Keane, and who turns out on the slow 1/4 mile up to the Whitechapel Road to have been a pleater of silk in her day, a skilled woman, 40 years at the needle until her eyes went. And this too is the district. Every ruined lodger was somebody skilled once. The lodging houses are full of trades that died and left their people behind. And you bring her through the great arched door of the London hospital, and you sit with her on the benches of the receiving room, and you look around you, and you understand you are inside the one palace this district actually owns, because that is what it is. The London is the largest voluntary hospital in the kingdom, several hundred beds, and even that is a thimble against the East End's need. And it stands on the Whitechapel Road taking all comers, sailors with crushed hands and dockers with crushed feet, fever children, phossy jaws, the whole daily harvest of the docks and the sweatshops and the streets. And it charges the poor nothing, because it runs on subscriptions, on charity, on the conscience money of the same city whose counting houses you can nearly see from its gate. The benches around you hold the district with its mask off, a boy of 10 with his arm in a sling made of his mother's shawl, a Jewish tailor holding a needle-pierced hand wrapped in a prayer shawl's corner, arguing gently with an orderly through his son's translation, a docker asleep sitting up, straight as a post, because dockers can sleep anywhere. It is the one luxury the call-on teaches. The smell is carbolic over everything, sharp and clean and utterly foreign, the smell of money spent on the poor, and you realise you've flinched from it, the way you'd flinch from cold water, because your nose has literally never met a clean large room before. Mrs. Keene is seen. A young house physician with tired eyes listens to her chest through a wooden tube front and back, and does not lie to her, and does not lecture her, and admits her to a ward. Winter is coming, and the bed is going spare, and he writes something on a card that makes it so. And you are allowed to walk her up, and the ward when you enter it nearly stops your heart, not because it is terrible, but because it is not. A long, clean room, iron beds in rows, red blankets, high windows full of grey light, a coal stove ticking in the middle, a nurse in a cap moving down the row with a trolley, and warmth, real warmth, everywhere, ownerless, just in the air, belonging to nobody and therefore to everyone. Mrs. Keene sits on the edge of her bed. Her bed, a bed with her card on it that no deputy can let to anyone else at 1 a.m, and she smooths the red blanket with one flat hand twice, the way you'd gentle an animal, and she looks up at you, and neither of you says anything, because what is there to say? A clean bed and a coal stove, in the year of the world's great horror, 80 yards from Hanbury Street, both true, both Whitechapel. And here is the thing about the London hospital in the autumn of 1888 that you don't know as you walk back down the ward, though the whole city whispers versions of it. This building is stitched into the terror at every seam. It was to the London that the crowds looked when the first medical evidence spoke of skill with a knife. Students, dressers, mad surgeons. The theories bred here like flies. It is in the London's basement that Joseph Merrick sleeps, the most famous patient in England, taken in off the freak show circuit by a surgeon named Trevis, and given rooms for life, so that the same institution shelters, in the same season, the most stared-at man alive and the anonymous coughing women no one ever looked at once. And it is past the London's lit front that every woman in this story walks, on her last night or an ordinary one, because everything in this district passes the London eventually. It is the lighthouse of the Whitechapel Road. Wards glowing at 2 a.m. when everything else is black, and there are women. You've heard them say it at the kitchen fire, this exact sentence, who time their late walks to pass beneath those windows, because light is company, and company is safety, and the hospital never sleeps. So someone, in a manner of speaking, is always watching. You spend Griffin's threepence on beef tea for Mrs. Keene's locker as instructed, and you walk home in the dusk along the road, past the coffee stall, past the Bell Foundry, and you find you are carrying the ward with you, the way you carried the view from the church tower. Another picture for the small gallery you are assembling this autumn, the one you will keep your whole life, the pictures that answer the newspapers without arguing with them. The yard behind Hanbury Street is real. So is the red blanket. The world has decided it can only look at one of them. You have decided you will keep looking at both. That, it turns out, is what living somewhere means. One more piece of that autumn belongs in your hands before we let the winter in, and it is the piece history keeps in its coldest drawer. The night you stood watch. It comes about simply. The Vigilance patrols run on men, and men have shifts and colds and wives, and one raw night in late October, the rota chalked inside the frying pan's door comes up short, and the man with the mastiff, his name, you have learned by now, is Harkness, a retired sergeant of Marines who keeps a chandler's shop on Brick Lane and speaks about 9 words a week. Harkness is standing the corner of Flower and Dean and Commercial Street alone, and you're coming home late from the lane and you stop, for no reason you could give evidence about, and you say, "I'll stand with you a bit." He looks at you for a long moment. The dog looks at you. Some tribunal convenes and rules. "Stand there then," Harkness says, and points to the other side of the lamp. "In the light, not out of it." And so for 2 hours, from 10 until the last houses bolt, you learn the trade of the corner. It is a trade you would not have guessed. You learn that watching a street is work your eyes do in a pattern. Doorways, court mouths, the far corner, back. The way your hands do fold, paste, press. You learn that a watcher stand with the lamp behind her shoulder so her own face is dark and the street is lit, and that the dog is not for biting. The dog is for the sound it makes low in its chest when someone crosses from the far pavement. A sound that reaches a man's spine before it reaches his ears and turns most trouble around all by itself. You learn the greetings. Every woman coming home alone gets evening, and the ones who slow their step get walked, and the walk-in is done one pace behind and one to the side, never level, never touching, a distance that took the patrols about a week of that terrible autumn to work out, and that says, more clearly than any words could, "We know you have reasons to fear men, including us." And you learn the cost of it, standing there. The cold comes up through your mended boots like water rising in a boat. Your face stops being yours after the first hour. The naphtha flares are out and the road's roar has dropped to its night register. And in the quiet you can hear the district breathing, a window sash, a dog 3 streets over, the sailorish creak of old buildings settling. And every single one of those sounds, all night, has to be picked up, weighed, and set down again. That is the tax the killer levied on 80,000 people. You understand standing there with your hands dying in your pockets. Not the terror of the bad nights, but the weighing. This endless invisible clerking of noises, done by every wakeful person behind every dark window, hour after hour for a whole autumn. Fear is not a feeling here anymore. It is a shift everyone works without wages. At 11:30, a girl of maybe 15 comes up Commercial Street too fast, half running, and stops inside your lamplight like a bird landing, and can't at first say what's behind her. A man, she thinks, from the corner of Thrall, kept pace with her. And Harkness doesn't ask her to be sure, doesn't ask anything, just angles his chin at you, meaning stay in the light, and goes down Thrall Street with the dog and the bullseye lantern. Unhurried, terrible, and comes back 4 minutes later, having found nothing. Because there is usually nothing. Because half the district's terrors are shadows now, and all of them get treated as real. That being the only safe rule, and the girl by then has stopped shaking, mostly because you have done the thing the corner is actually for, which is not fighting anyone. It is standing in the light with your feet planted so that a frightened person has somewhere to run to that is nearer than home. You walk her to Wilmot's yourself. She lodges 2 doors up. 1 pace behind, 1 to the side. At midnight, Harkness pulls a flask of Griffin's hot water gone lukewarm out of his coat, drinks, hands it over without looking at you, which from Harkness is a knighthood, and says his 9 words for the week. You stood well. Corners want women too. Come Thursday. You come Thursday. You come most Thursdays after that through the winter. And here is the strange truth you would never say aloud at the kitchen fire. The fear is smaller on the corner than in the bed. In the bed the night happens to you. On the corner you happen to it. You're the lamp and the planted feet. You're the sound trouble hears and reconsiders. And something in you that has been clenched since the last day of August lets out, degree by degree, over those Thursday nights, until you notice 1 week in December that you have stopped flinching at footsteps and started reading them. That's not courage quite. It's older than courage. It's what this district has always done with everything the world dropped on it. Picked it up, turned it over, and made it into a job of work. The autumn deepens. Late October brings the first true fogs, and I want to spend a little time inside one with you, because the fog is the other main character of this story, and almost everything people picture about it is slightly wrong in ways that matter. It is not romantic, and it is not grey. A real London particular is yellow-brown, the colour of weak tea with milk gone wrong, because it is not mist at all, but the smoke of a million coal fires trapped under cold still air and mixed with river damp, a marinade of sulphur that you don't so much see as chew. It has taste, metallic, sooty, faintly of eggs, and it coats. By the end of a fog day your teeth feel furred, the inside of your nose is black, your shawl smells of it for a week, and the lodging house wash line comes in dirtier than it went out. It kills, in the plain statistical way. The weeks of great fog send the death rate leaping, the coughs of the old and the young turning in a night into something that drowns them. And the undertakers on the Whitechapel Road, there are many, it is a reliable trade. Work late, and it does something to space itself. Sound goes strange, muffled at distance, then suddenly intimate, so that a cough 30 feet away is nothing, and a footstep 6 feet away arrives like a touch on your shoulder. Light dies in it. The gas lamps become dandelion heads of dim gold hanging in nothing, showing you not the street but only themselves. On the worst nights the link boys come back out, a trade you thought belonged to your grandmother's stories. Boys with torches walking the lost home for a penny, and omnibuses are led at walking pace by men carrying flares, and people are killed at the dock edges and the crossings simply by stepping into the dark and being wrong about what was in it. Now put the autumn's fear into that. There are nights in late October when you come out of the factory at 6 into a wall of it, and the 2.5 miles home become a journey by braille. Curb edge under the boot sole, railing under the glove, the counted turnings, the smell map you didn't know you owned until now. Brewery means Brick Lane, tan yard too far south, turn back, and every human being you pass is a sound first, then a darkening, then a face swimming up, sudden and close and gone, and each one, every single one, for the half second it hangs there, is him. That is what the fog does to the fear. It makes it everyone. A district that had begun cautiously to sort itself into the watched and the watchers is dissolved by the weather back into shapes, and the patrols are helpless. A man could do anything 6 feet from a constable in a proper particular, and everyone knows it, and the strangest thing is that nothing happens. The dark of the moon comes and goes. The fogs come and go. November begins. Nothing happens, and the nothing stretches. 5 weeks now since the terrible double night, and the papers begin, cautiously, the way you'd poke a dog you thought was dead, to use words like cessation, and the kitchens permit themselves theories of ending. He's fled to America, he's in an asylum, he's dead in the river, and rents on beds ease slightly. And one Thursday you realise you walked the last 80 yards from the corner alone, without noticing, the way you used to, and you stop inside the door and feel the noticing arrive late, and you cannot decide whether what you feel is health or forgetting, or whether, at 19, in this place, there is any difference. And then it is the 9th of November, the Lord Mayor's show. You need to understand what that day is in the calendar of the poor. It is the great free spectacle of the London year. The new Lord Mayor rides in his gilded coach from the city to Westminster, with soldiers, bands, floats, men in armour, the whole medieval circus, and the entire East End that can walk, takes the day and pushes west to line the route, because it costs nothing, and glory that costs nothing comes twice a year at most. The factory gives no holiday, but half the bench takes one anyway. Wages be damned, and you nearly do, and don't. 3 shillings 11 pence has become by savage discipline 7 and 4, and there is a real winter coat in a pawnshop window on the lane, with your name almost on it. And so you're at your bench in Bow, folding, pasting, pressing, in a workroom half empty and strangely quiet, when the news of Dorset Street arrives. It comes in the person of the foreman's boy, sent running from the office with a message for the foreman, and the message is supposed to be private and is instead all over the floor in 90 seconds, the way everything is, and the words that cross the benches this time are not like the other times. The other times the whisper ran quick and hot. This one moves slowly, and where it lands the hands stop. A whole bench of hands stopped. You hear it from Lisa, who hears it from the boy directly, and Lisa does not whisper it. She puts down her brush, and she says it out loud, flatly, to the room, as if reading a name off a list, because some news is too heavy to whisper. Miller's Court, Dorset Street, indoors. A young one this time, indoors. Every horror of the autumn until now happened in the open. Yards, squares, pavements, and the whole architecture of the district's courage was built on that fact. Inside was safe. Inside was the point. All the rituals, the corner waiting, the patrol rota, Griffin's bolt, the fourpence itself, the entire economy of the lodging houses, every one of them was a machine for getting bodies indoors before the dark could price them. "Don't let the bed," Annie said. "I shan't be long." And the horror of Annie was that she never got back inside. Now the word is indoors. A room. Her own room. A rented room off Dorset Street, 30 feet from 100 sleeping neighbours, and the walls that were the whole meaning of fourpence turn out to have kept nothing out. Only, the room understands this without anyone saying it, only kept the world from seeing in. Her name was Mary Jane Kelly. She was somewhere near 25, and that is almost the only fact about her that 2 witnesses agree on, because Mary told stories about herself the way Long Liz told the shipwreck. Wales, Ireland, a gentleman, Paris, a past with better lighting, and who in these streets would begrudge her that? Half the kitchen fire's best hours are lies with better lighting. She was young, she was liked, she was behind on her rent, to the tune of 29 shillings, which is to say she was everyone. She was last heard singing. A neighbour across the court heard her at 1 in the morning, singing an old, sweet parlour song to herself or to someone. A violet I plucked from mother's grave. Over and over, the way you sing when you're warm and a little drunk and the night is nearly over, and the neighbour thought nothing of it, because a girl singing behind her own wall at 1 in the morning is the sound of things being right. You do not go to Dorset Street. This time you don't go. Thousands do. The police seal the court, and the crowd stands all day in the rain-grey street, simply facing the sealed entrance. Silent, like a congregation facing an altar that will not open. But you have been on Dorset Street 10,000 times. You were born off it. Your mother dipped matches 2 doors from that court, and you need no crowd to show you the geography. You walk home the long way instead, all the way round by Bishopsgate, adding a mile in the cold to avoid one street. And you understand as you do it that this is now a thing your body will do for the rest of its life. There is a street it will not use. The map has a hole in it. You carry the hole home, past the corner where tonight the Vigilance men stand doubled, and grim and useless and necessary, into the kitchen where nobody's doing voices, where Griffin has bolted the door an hour early, where old Sarah sits staring into the grate with her tea going cold at her elbow, and where the two Cork sisters are saying the rosary in Irish, low, the beads clicking soft as the fire, and nobody mocks, and nobody joins, and the click of the beads and the crack of the coals are the whole of the conversation, and that is the 9th of November, the day the Lord Mayor's golden coach rolled through the city, while the news ran east down every street, like water finding a drain, and the crowds on the route heard it shouted over the bands, murder, horrible murder, another one, and the show rolled on because the show always rolls on, gilt and drums and armour, and 80,000 people went home early and bolted what could be bolted. It is the last one. You don't know that. Nobody knows that. That is the specific cruelty of the winter to come. That will be lived entirely without the one fact that would make it livable. But it is, as history will draw the line, the last. The autumn of terror ends there, on the 9th of November, indoors, with a song. What does not end is everything the autumn built. Winter comes down on the district like a lid. December in Whitechapel is a season with its own economy of survival, and the murders or no murders the economy runs. The cold is the great fact now. It moves into the lodging house like a lodger who pays nothing and takes the best of everything. It is in the basin, water as a skin of ice some mornings. It is in the privy in the yard. It is in your boots for the first mile every day until your own blood warms the leather. It is in old Sarah's knees and in the coughing woman's chest, where it settles in and begins with the patience of its kind to kill her. She will go in February, quietly, in the bed by the window, and the room will take up a collection so she isn't buried by the parish and raise 4 shillings, and it won't be enough, and she'll be buried by the parish, and the room will spend the 4 shillings drinking to her, which everyone agrees is what she'd have picked anyway. You get the coat, that's December's other headline. 7 shillings and 6pence, the pawn shop on the lane, a man's coat cut down badly for a woman and none the worse for it. Wool the colour of strong tea, heavy as a sleeping child across your arm, and the first morning you wear it out the door into the black cold, you understand that everything you've ever heard, the comfortable say about the deserving and the undeserving poor, could be settled forever by giving each of them 1 December and 1 coat. It changes the mathematics of your entire day. The walk to Bow becomes merely long instead of punishing. You stop losing the first hour of bench work to dead white fingers. You sleep with it over the blanket, and under the smell of pawn shop camphor you can smell, some nights, the ghost of whoever wore the wool before you. Pipe smoke and tar, some docker or sailor gone who knows where, keeping you warm out of the past, which is, if you think about it, simply what history is. And the fear does the thing that fear does when its emergency outlives its energy. It becomes furniture. It does not leave. Nothing so clean. The Vigilance patrols thin out with the cold and the flagging funds, but the corner waiting stays, quietly permanent, a custom now, the way customs are born, not decided but repeated until nobody remembers deciding. The women of the house walk in twos without arranging it. Griffin's early bolt stays early. When a stranger takes a bed, the kitchen reads him with one flick of 40 eyes, a whole tribunal sitting and rising in a second, and this too is permanent now and will still be detectable in the pubs of this district a century on, That reflex, stranger, read him. The autumn taught it to a generation, and the generation taught it to the streets. The papers move on by inches. There are scares. Every December drunk found sleeping in a doorway raises a shout. Every quarrel behind a wall brings a whistle. And there are, forever after, the anniversaries and the theories which will outlive the empire itself. But the thing itself is over, and the district begins the long, strange work of living with what it now is, the most famous poor place on earth, because that is the durable inheritance, and it is worth standing still for a moment to look at it squarely, since it is the actual answer to the question this whole night story is named for. How did Whitechapel become London's most feared district? Not in the end because of what happened in it. Worse things, by the cold arithmetic of death, happened in it every ordinary year. The fever took more, the winter took more, the phosphorus and the docks and the child beds took more, and nobody outside ever feared the district for those, because those deaths belonged to the poor alone and stayed off the front pages. It became the most feared district on earth, because for one autumn the whole world looked at it, looked through a keyhole shaped like a knife, and then never stopped describing what it saw. The fear was built out of print. Millions of people who would never smell the lane on a Saturday now knew Whitechapel the way they knew hell, as a place entirely made of its worst nights. The word itself detached from the map and became an adjective, and the 80,000 people who actually lived there, who worked and struck and sang and mended boots and buried their coughing dead and walked each other home, were fixed forever in the world's mind at their single darkest hour, the way a photograph fixes a face mid-flinch and calls it the face. You feel this happen in small ways, that winter and after. The sightseers come, they really do. Well-dressed parties, some with guidebooks, walk in Hanbury Street on Sunday afternoons, and a man outside the 10 Bells will point out the sights for a fee, and the children of the district discover they can charge a penny to show the way to Bucks Row, and invent details for twopence more, and you watch a girl of 9 do it, solemn as a curate. 3 details out of 4 invented on the spot, and you don't know whether to laugh or throw something, and you settle being of this district for both. Charity money keeps coming, and demolition notices follow it, and within 5 years the wreckers truly do come to Flower and Dean Street, and the house you slept in that whole autumn goes down in a fortnight of dust, and model dwellings rise brick and iron and rules, and Griffin retires on his tin, and old Sarah does not live to be moved, which she would have told you was her plan all along. And you? Since you'll wonder, and since we have walked a long way together tonight, I'll tell you what the record of lives like yours suggests, which is not an ending but a continuing. The match factory swears off white phosphorus at the century's turn. The strike of 88 lit that long fuse, your strike, the one the world forgot to remember, and by then you're gone from the bench anyway. You marry or you don't, the odds say a docker or a porter. 2 rooms in Bow, which after the fourpenny attic feels like landed estate. Children, the odds say 4, the odds say you bury one, and the odds have their way with you there as everywhere, and you go on. You become one of the women at some other fire, you keep the thimble. Your thumbs heal into shining seams you can find in the dark with a fingertip, a braille of the glue years, and on winter nights a granddaughter traces them and asks, and you tell her about the strike. Boots on the stairs, and she asks instead, because the world has already taught her which Whitechapel story is the story. She asks about him, and you look at this child by the fire, and you make the choice your whole district made. one fireside at a time for 100 years. How much of the dark to hand down, and how much of the rest? The kitchen, the herring, the bishop story, the shilling, the tower, the coat. How much of the enormous, ordinary aliveness that the famous darkness lived inside of, like one bad tile in a roof of 80,000. You tell her about the tower, and now the fire is low, and the story is nearly done, so let it start to slow, the way a long day slows. Let the district lie down around you one last time. It is a night in that December. Any night. This night. You have come the 2.5 miles in the dark in the heavy coat, past the bell foundry sleeping, past the hospital's lit windows, through the flares and the frying smoke of the road, and you have waited at the corner of Osborne Street out of custom, and walked the 80 yards with the Cork sisters, boot heels loud, and Griffin has taken your fourpence and shot the bolt, iron into iron, the day's final punctuation. You've had your hour at the fire. Your boots are drying on the fender, steaming faintly, soles upward. Old Sarah has done the bishop badly, then properly. The needle and the thimble have done their round. The tea can is rinsed and hung. And now you are in the bed, in the room, among the breathing. 11 women, the whistling snore by the window, the Irish murmuring, going down now, going under, the blankets grease and the coats camphor and the coal and the fried fish and the old cold street coming through the sash, the whole deep chord of it, the smell that will mean safe to some ancient part of you for the rest of your life. Because that is the trick memory plays on the survivors of hard places. It keeps the safety and lets the misery blur. The house ticks and settles. Down in the kitchen the fire is banked, never out, the one law of the house, the red heart of it breathing slow under its blanket of small coal, and the warmth of it climbs the stairs all night like a watchman doing rounds. Outside, the district lies under the cold. The naphtha flares are out. The barrows are chained. The constable passes at 2.5 miles an hour, his lantern swinging a slow yellow arc across the shutters, and his boots ring and fade, ring and fade. Somewhere a dog, somewhere the last drunk singing his hymn down to its bones. The vigilance man stands his corner with the mastiff leaning warm against his leg, and above them all, over the roofs, over the 80,000 sleeping and the handful waking, the clock face of Christ Church hangs its small yellow moon in the black, and the spire goes up and up into the smoke, keeping its old cold watch, as it did before any of this, as it will after all of it. Centuries will pass. They have passed. The house you're lying in is gone. The street itself is gone, renamed, rebuilt. The fog is gone, legislated away, chimney by chimney. The fourpenny beds and the phosphorus and the fever, gone. The district is still there, and still poor men's first landing. New languages at the same market stalls, new smells of supper in the same brick canyons, and the tourists still come on Sunday afternoons to hear about the autumn, and the spire still stands over all of it, cleaned white now, the soot of your sky scrubbed off it, so that you would know it and not know it, the way it would know and not know you. But people still live there, still work there, still walk each other home without saying why, still sit up late by whatever now passes for the fire, laughing at whatever now passes for the bishop. Some things don't change. The need of tired bodies for warmth, and of frightened ones for company, and of all of them, every night since the first night, for this, for the lying down, the pulling close of the blanket, the letting go. The human heart doesn't change. The end of the day doesn't change. So let it come now. Let it come for you the way it came for Nell. In the attic on Flower and Dean Street 140 winters ago, with the coat over the blanket and the boots steaming by a fire she couldn't see, but knew was burning. Let the room grow warm around you. Let the sounds of your own street, whatever they are, fold themselves down small. Let the day's 10,000 motions leave your hands. Fold, paste, press. Slower now. Fold, paste, slower. You're warm enough. You're safe enough. You've done enough. You have a roof and a bed and a morning that will manage without you until it needs you. That's more than most of the people in this story ever held in one night. That's enough. That's plenty. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. Somewhere far off, if you listen with the last of your listening, a great bell is striking an hour you're too tired to count. Let it strike. It's not for you. Nothing is asked of you now. Nothing, as Kate said at the station door and meant it as a joke, and will take it tonight as a blessing instead. Just rest. Just the long, slow drift down into the dark, which was never, whatever they told you, only a place where bad things happen. It is also where the fire is banked, and the door is bolted, and everyone you walked home is home. You've earned this rest. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.